All right, welcome back to the Prolific Author Podcast. We are here today with Kathryn Amurra. How are you today, Kathryn?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Why don't we start by having you tell everyone who you are and what you write?
Okay. Well, my name is Kathryn Amurra, and I like to write romance. Currently, I have 3 books out in a historical romance series. It's ancient world historical romance, so it's all ancient Rome stuff. But I'm working on another series that's kind of a paranormal romance series. So I like all things romance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a day job though, so I only get to do this at night, but
Gotcha.
I really enjoy it.
So how long have you been writing?
I think I've been writing since I was a kid, but in like 2016 or 2017, I remember I was driving my family back from Illinois and it was snowing and we were in the mountains coming back to North Carolina. And I was thinking to myself, this is the year. I'm just going to figure out how to do this, like to write a full novel from beginning to end. And I started thinking about this story. And that was the year that I actually, figured out how many words I should write and how to formulate this. And I started going to the Georgia Romance Writers annual conference that they have in Atlanta, which was fantastic. It really helped me figure out how to try and do what I wanted to do. So since then, I've written a few stories. My first ones are the ones that I'm revamping now for the paranormal series. And then the ancient Rome ones are ones I wrote later on after I'd learned something about how to do this. So it's been a lot of fun. I've loved it.
Good. So my first question is, do you have any particular way that you sell your historical fiction? Ancient Rome is a really specific time period, and I write historical. And so I'm just wondering how you go about doing that.
Well, I'm not very good at the selling part yet. I've been learning a lot about Amazon. I mean, most of the stuff I'm selling is on Amazon, and most of it is by word of mouth, or I'll have like free promotions. And I think that helps a lot because I think there's lists out there that, people see when something is free and they try it. And then sometimes they like it. And I think they keep getting emails every time I publish something new. So that I think is very helpful. But I have a lot left to learn on the whole selling part of it. So right now it's just word of mouth and, people who happen upon my stuff. But you're right, it's a very niche kind of period in time, which I think is pretty cool to, have something that's different, but at the same time, the same, because it's still got, a guy who likes a girl and a girl who likes a guy and they, get together. So it's still the same in that respect, but just all the stuff around them is different.
Right. Yeah. I think historical is one genre that Amazon still really needs to niche down on to different time periods, because you can't call all historical romance or all historical fiction the same because they're all different time periods. And there's like literally 1,000 of them. So they don't have nearly enough categories for all of them.
Yes, I always have trouble with that when I'm trying to pick the categories I'm in, but ancient world, I guess, is the best we can do at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So, what can you tell us about, the early part of your journey and the kinds of mistakes you made and overcame when you were learning how to do this?
Well, I think my biggest problem was to learn how to accept criticism and learn from it. I think all of us, or especially me, I write something down, I'm like, oh, this is really good. But that's because I don't know enough to know that, there are things that are lacking in how I've expressed an idea. My grammar is good. I know how to write, but that's different from knowing how to write. And just having my stories in contests or submitting them. The Georgia Romance Writers Conference has a great contest, I'll call it a contest, every year for unpublished authors, and you get a critique on your first 30 pages. And I think I learned more from that than anything else, because you get to see what others are reading into your story. And, oh, well, where's the backstory of the hero? Oh, well, I know it, it's in my head, but I didn't happen to write it down in the first or second chapter. And that's the kind of stuff, when you read it something and it's really good, it's really good and you're immersed in it. But then you go back and think about, well, why was this one good? And then this other one that I read was not as engaging, or not as, I had to sneak away to the bathroom during the day so that I could read, while my kids were downstairs fighting over lunch. That's the kind of book that I want to write, is one that, kind of consumes someone. And that's the stuff that's harder to learn and just takes time and takes the criticisms and the constructive criticisms. But, you know, they are people that are pointing out things that you could do better. And I think that for me, that's been very hard to, you know, first put yourself out there to get that kind of criticism. And then when you get it, to actually think about it and think, okay, how can I do this better?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things for everyone, but I really like the way that you said that we have to accept that the way that we express an idea might not be coming across to the reader the way we think it is. So how would you suggest that new, you know, authors go about kind of strengthening that muscle to get to the point where they can accept the criticism and learn from it?
I think it just takes going through it a lot and then getting that thick skin. You know, and it's different asking your mom to read something than it is to ask a sister-in-law or, you know, a coworker or a neighbor or someone who's less, you know, involved in who loves you less, I guess is the easy way to put it. But, you know, everyone wants to be encouraging and that's really good. But sometimes you need someone who has no, you know, skin in the game to just tell you, hey, this is what I thought here, and this is what you can do better, because right now, you know, you're not doing the best that you can. And I think it just takes doing it over and over again. And I still cringe every time I see, you know, someone's comments on a beta read or something, but, you know, it does get easier, I think, the more you do it.
Yeah, for sure. I think so too. I think it's the hardest thing to do early on with your first manuscript, because it's your baby and it's hard to accept it on that. But once you get a few cranking out, then you kind of get used to it and know that you got to get some critiques on it and everything.
Yeah, and you have all this self-doubt to begin with. So when you put yourself out there and then you get something less than, oh, this was the best book I've ever read in my whole life, then I don't know, it's easy to let that feed your own self-doubt and, oh, I'll never be that good and I'll never make it. And that's the kind of stuff that you have to kind of shut off and just accept the words for what they are and do better. And if you want it and you keep working at it, I think anybody can do it.
Yeah, I agree. So you said you're revamping some of your early stories. So tell us a little bit about that and what you've learned in terms of the art of storytelling over the years.
Apparently I've learned a lot, because I read them now and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I think one of my biggest problems when I first started writing is how I express descriptions in my stories. I'm not a description person, so I don't like describing things. I like to get to the feelings and, you know, how people feel towards each other and what they say. I like dialogue a lot. But you still have to set up, you know, what's going on and what things look like. But how you do that can either make a book heavy, you know, like heavy with data, and you don't want to do that. Like I would read some passages and it looked like a laundry list of what the person had in their refrigerator, and that has nothing to do with the story. It doesn't matter that, you know, they have to put aside the ketchup to get to the relish. I mean, it doesn't matter. But you have to have enough to give the reader an idea of what's going on without giving details that are unimportant. And that's a very hard thing to figure out, what that balance is. And another thing that I've learned more recently is that descriptions of things have to do with the perspective of who you're writing from. So, you know, if someone's walking into their house for the 8,000th time, they're not going to notice the molding and the, you know, the brocade and the fabric curtains, you know, those are the descriptions that aren't natural. You don't walk into a house and admire your own, unless you're looking at it from a different perspective, or you're with someone who's never seen it and you're like, oh, I've never noticed that, you know, I do have, you know, very fancy furnishings or something. So you have to pick your point of view to kind of help you with the descriptions that you're wanting to give to add to the story. So those are all things I think that when you read a really good book, you take for granted, because it all seems easy and you get the picture in your head, and it doesn't seem unnatural or forced, but it's very hard to do that and to put it into practice. So those are the things that I'm trying to work on with the revamping that I'm doing.
Yeah, so what kind of difference do you think it makes getting the right kinds of details across? Like, why is that so important?
Well, I think details help you understand what the characters are feeling. Like when the hero and the heroine are looking at each other, you know, just describing what they're seeing in the other person gives you an idea of how they feel towards the other person. Because descriptions aren't objective, they're subjective, and it depends on who's doing the describing, what they're going to say. So that can all very subtly tell you how the people are feeling, and set the mood and explain the plot. I mean, descriptions are very important, but it's equally important to do them the right way. And it's very hard. I mean, these things are very hard to figure out, and I'm still figuring it out. But I think the more you read and the more you try and write and then reread and rewrite and get people's perspective on what you've written, I think that just helps you learn how to do it better.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's really a good thing to point out to new authors, because, you know, most new authors, and we were all there at one point, don't know what they don't know. So when, I mean, I guess the kind of the two things you've gone over to recap are, when you're doing a description, it needs to be relevant to the story, not just random extraneous details, but also needs to be filtered through the perspective of the character, and which means not only how they describe it, but like what they think about what they're describing, what their emotions about it are, you know? Yeah.
And the words they use to describe it, you know, if it's someone like me describing a car, I'm going to call it red, small. I mean, I'm not going to know the make and model unless someone tells me, or it's a car that I knew from my past, you know, so all these things, you know, the vocabulary even that you use has to be relevant to the person who's doing it. And that helps you pick your point of view too, I think. If you know what you want to describe, then maybe you use, you know, the one character's point of view rather than the other, and then switch back later. So that it's like a puzzle. My mother-in-law asks me all the time, you know, I don't know how you do this and how you think of all these things, but then she'll sit down and do like a 2,000 piece puzzle. I'm like, I can't do a 2,000 piece puzzle, but to me, these stories are like puzzles, and that's how I, you know, work on my puzzles. So it's,
right.
The same type of exercise.
So do you have any particular tips for getting into the character's point of view so that you can describe things from their point of view?
I think just for me, I think about the characters a lot during the day, like walking from my car to work, or, you know, just every minute that I'm not writing or not, you know, working on stuff that I, you know, if I'm not concentrating, I'm gonna get fired, that kind of thing. You know, I think about my characters and where they're at in the story, what they would be feeling and what they would be doing next, what they would be saying. I mean, I think it's a form of insanity, really. I have voices in my head all the time, and it's not normal, but that's how I write when I'm not writing. And then when I sit down for the 20 minutes that I have at night, then I'll write. And sometimes I'll write a page, sometimes I'll write 2 lines, and that's still, you know, that's still adding to what, you know, working towards the goal that I have of finishing the story. But I think just thinking through things a lot, and then not being scared when you're rereading things to just cut things out and, you know, do it over again, or, you know, revise. You can't be too wedded to what you've written, because, you know, sometimes the things that come out are not as good as what could be there. So you have to not be scared about pressing the delete button sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, that's really great advice. So can I ask, is there any particular reason that you picked like historical and paranormal, or like, can you tell us a little bit about what's different, what's the same between them?
Sure. Well, the historical, the ancient Rome stuff, my first story in that series, I knew what I wanted the setup to be, and I wanted the heroine to have a brother who had some form of autism that people didn't understand, you know, that he looked normal. He looked like a person you would, you know, meet and have a conversation with, but he had the mind of a child. So he's not your typical person. And I wanted that to cause problems with, you know, some military service that he had to do. And that would be her motivation for marrying this older governor. And then, you know, of course, she meets some other guy, and that causes conflict. So I was trying to think of a time period where that kind of setup would work. It obviously wouldn't work, you know, these days. And I don't know, I just started looking at ancient Rome and seeing, oh, okay, you know, I think that we could make that work. And then the more I researched it, the more I found it interesting. And I tried to find books to read in the ancient Roman time period that were romance. And I read some Kate Quinn novels, but that was it. Like, I couldn't find, and I know there's other stuff out there, but just like perusing the shelves at Barnes and Noble, I couldn't, you know, find that much. So I thought, well, that's also kind of cool to write something that, nobody will know really if I describe this incorrectly. This one detail, it's a
Right.
little bit easier to write about something that not many people know about. You can kind of fill in the blanks, as long as it makes some sort of logical sense,
Yeah.
So it was fun. It was fun to do the research for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your plans for the future then? Are you going to keep writing paranormal or historical or do other genres?
I have one more book in the ancient Roman series that I started writing. So that's the 4th book. And then in the paranormal series, I have 2 written, one almost completely rewritten that's going to come out later this year. And then the second one I have to rewrite, and I think that'll go pretty fast. The 3rd book I have half written, and that's a vampire story, because I love vampires, even though they're everywhere, but I still love them. And then I have a 4th one in my head that I haven't started writing yet. So I think that'll take us till maybe 2028 or so, unless I make enough money that I can quit my day job. But
Yeah.
But so I have plans like that. But I like romance. I think that's at the heart of anything that I want to write. And the historical stuff, even the paranormal stuff, has some historical elements to it and flashbacks and things like that, because I think I'll keep going back to that.
Yeah. That's
It's fun. Yeah.
So do you have any other advice you'd like to dispense to new writers who are maybe just getting started?
Don't give up. Keep doing it, and do it because you love it. Don't do it. I mean, it'd be nice to make money and, have that be your livelihood, and, that would be fantastic. But I'm writing because I love it, and I love hearing what people think of my stories. And that just makes me happy. It makes me complete. And I wonder how I'm 45 years old, and I wonder how it took me this long. I started writing again when I was like 38 or 39 or something. And I had kids, and, life, happens, and I didn't really think about it, but I'm very glad that I'm doing it again. It makes me a whole person. And I think it makes me better at everything else that I'm doing, to have this part fulfilled for myself.
Yeah, I love that. That's really lovely. And I think that you're a really good example of someone who, isn't doing it full time, and you just, get in the writing time whenever you can, but you still push forward and get your books done, so, there's a lot of people who, if they don't have several hours every day, like, just get frustrated and give up, but you just take, whatever time you can, and it adds up and you end up getting things published.
Yeah, and I think if someone really wants to do it, they should definitely do it. And don't be afraid to ask people for what they think or what their advice is. That was another thing that in the beginning, I didn't want to tell anyone that I was writing. I didn't want anyone to read my stuff because I didn't think it was good. But so what? Have them read it, have them tell you what they think about it, and then get better. That's what you want to do, then, work at it and do better, and you will get better. It's all practice. My mom used to say, nobody comes out of their mother's womb knowing how to do anything. You learn how to do all this stuff. And I tell myself that all the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's such great advice. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing your experiences with us. Where can people connect with you and your books?
Well, I think if you Google Kathryn Amurra, it's Kathryn Amurra. It's the only one out there on Amazon, and I have a website, but it's a very fragile, frail thing. I have to get better at that too, but you can find out about me there too. And
Great.
You want to email me. I love hearing from people.
All right, I will make sure and link those up in the show notes so that everybody can find you.
Thank you.
But yeah, thanks for being here, and good luck with everything.
Great talking to you. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.